Edition, who could draw nicest, most beautiful rendition of the still life of grapes. So Zeuxis goes first and he reveals his painting. The grapes are so beautiful that birds come down and they try to eat them. And then Zeuxis goes over to Parrhasius' side and he says, "Let's see your grapes." And he tries to pull down the curtain, only to realize the painting was of the curtain itself. And while Zeuxis tricked the birds and tricked the audience, Parrhasius was able to trick his fellow artist. Just another artistic rendering. But we need to go further. So I was wondering, so yeah, maybe this story establishes that the responsibility of the artist is to be convincing to his peers, but I still needed to go further, and I pondered, what would it look like if Parrhasius could trick himself? Look familiar? So Bitcoin is an asset that can back itself, and in my hypothetical scenario, Parrhasius' art allows them to trick itself. That is, if you create an illusion that at once is self-aware of its illusory nature, while still holding the property of being illusory, you start to run into that sort of mystical paradox that I brought up before that made Bitcoin so beautiful in itself. So, how do you do it? And I realized the shakeup is needed at the roots rather than the branches. Oh man, you're doing well, you're doing well. So I was inspired by the works of 20th century artists like Duchamp and Andy Warhol, who were able to apply this type of concept in order to create art that deconstructs the concept of art, but also teaches us something new about art. I actually can't reveal the precise nature of the art itself, I can only tease it, but we'll be in touch, I'll get to that at the end. Andy Warhol famously created the Brillo box, where he simply just made replicas of the Brillo box made by the Brillo company and resold it for I think like $50, and some of these have sold at auction recently for $1.2 million, like as recently as 2008. I have some, I'll just keep going. Oh, no, go back. This is loaded now. Yeah, echoing Duchamp's quote, I don't believe in art, I believe in artists. And then, in addition to the actual art itself, which I wish I could show you exactly what I have in mind following in the footsteps of these 20th century artists, who, again, deconstructed art, actually played with people's expectations of art, but in doing so, created art in that way. I wanted to combat the tendencies of the NFT market that I mentioned before, where you have these whitelists, you have connections, you have nepotism, you have people trying to get in first, and it's just unfair. And it seems to me that this is exclusively the purpose of the NFT market today, and it's just not right. There's no soul in it, there's no spirit in it. All I see is a bunch of narcissism. I don't see art, I see just cultural transactions. So let's go. I've been hard at work in my secret lab designing a new algorithm that's going to define price curves that change. But anyway, I've been hard at work creating a new type of price curve where it's going to be completely different. Nobody gets any sort of advantages. There is no first mover advantage. There is no nepotism. Nobody that I know, and not even myself, gets any sort of any advantage with respect to this NFT. You actually get rewarded directly in proportion to your faith. No pain, no gain, no risk, no reward. I've actually designed it so that people who come first have to pay more and get punished more. But it creates a sort of equilibrium with the gas prices. This is technical stuff that's better served later, and you'll be able to see it later because, Larry, when the project launches, I will be publishing a technical white paper, which outlines the mechanism that I use to generate these curves. My intention is not only to use this mechanism for my own project, but to provide a blueprint for people to use this in future projects and have a lasting influence that's more in the vein of fertility, rather than just making money. Telemachus is me, that's my hacker name, don't be so intimidated. Let's go, keep going. And again, I cannot show you the actual project right now because it's the sort of thing that I really want to be revealed in the days in the lead up to the launch. But you're gonna love it. And the rest rest assured my project incorporates all of the elements that I brought up in this presentation. Continue. In particular, there is one person who I believe had a similar level of appreciation for the patterns that I raised in the first half of this presentation. That's my favorite quote, Bob. When he created fugues that used polyphony, different components of the fugue would amplify the greater voice, which would create a unified sound, but each of the components were perfectly good on their own. Once the unified sound would be created, each of the sub-voices would in turn be amplified because you could understand the sub-voice against the backdrop of the entire song, creating a sort of positive feedback loop. And that's actually the mindset the mathematical sort of mindset that I've had when creating the art itself. The distribution of the NFTs combines several symmetries and several voices, you could say, based on the principle of reflection, where each symmetry is kind of raised or elevated against the backdrop of the others. But then the real beauty is generated from the interplay of all these symmetries simultaneously. But you'll have to see what I mean. And of course, I've also incorporated some interesting kind of novelty stuff. So some of my own spiritual experiences in the past 3 years. I used Hindu esotericism rather than Jewish because chakras are more colorful. And I think the public will like it more. So I did have to make a concession. The collection size is going to be about 4,096 NFTs. Not about exactly. That's 2 to the 12 power because there are 12 tribes of Israel. 216 of them will be free. The initial ask is $5 million and it will be a 2.5% trading fee on each. This is the lowest I can give before other people make more on it than I do. Like OpenSea takes a 2.5% trading fee. Launch will be towards the end of February or early March. I can't tell you the name either. It's also a secret, but we're calling it Project UA. And yeah, this is my information, so you can get in touch with me this way if you're looking for it. And I'm not gonna create a mailing list of directly or anything. If you're interested in the project, you have to just directly get in touch with me in any way that you can. Make sure that you refer to where we met, and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take the opportunity to bless this young man who very much values, I don't know, he mentioned something about Hindu, forget about that. He's a proud Jew, his name is Shofar. Shofar means the special horn that we blow on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I want to bless you in the shul right next to the wall, and upstairs is the Aron HaKodesh, that you should be very, very successful. You should launch this project. This is no joke, this is very serious. I don't know if you understood half of, or a quarter of what he was talking about, but if you did, this young man is going to be very, very successful. So may Hashem be with you. May you go over the top and remember us. The Russian American